I will defend her. The strong, resolute voice cut through the tense atmosphere like a sharp blade. Astonished glances immediately swung toward the courtroom door. In the prolonged silence that seemed to stretch on forever, a black man stood in the aisle, still gripping his mop as droplets of water fell onto the gleaming tile floor. Murmurs of confusion quickly rippled into mocking laughter. "Janitor? You must be in the wrong room," jeered a voice from the press gallery. Soft chuckles echoed around the courtroom, but the man remained unmoved, his eyes fixed on the judge's bench. Jacob Lane, a middle-aged custodian at Stormtech's headquarters, a leading tech company, was usually invisible to everyone around him. But today, at the heart of this high-stakes federal trial, he chose to speak. "Sir, you're not allowed to stand there," the bailiff warned sternly as he strode forward. Jacob refused to back down. His voice rang out, firmer still. "I will defend her." The bailiff hesitated, glancing toward the bench. Judge Walter Harris, a silver-haired man with keen eyes, adjusted his glasses and surveyed Jacob. "What's your name?" the judge asked, calm but commanding. "Jacob Lane, Your Honor." "Mr. Lane," Judge Harris continued, his tone as clear as a bell, "are you the defense attorney for the defendant, Ms. Storm?" Jacob's gaze drifted to the defense table. There sat Vivien Storm, famed CEO whose face regularly graced Forbes and the Wall Street Journal, alone. The chair beside her, intended for her lead counsel, stood hauntingly empty. No one knew what had happened. Vivien's lawyer had vanished without explanation just before the trial. Vivien, clad in a flawless navy suit, turned to Jacob, her eyes, normally so poised, now wide with shock. "You?" she whispered incredulously. "You're just the janitor." "Yes, Ms. Storm," Jacob replied evenly, determination shining in his eyes. "I'm the janitor, but I know exactly what they're trying to do to you." The prosecution erupted in louder laughter. Marshall Kent, the top prosecutor in his expensive suit and undefeated in major cases, rose to taunt Jacob. "Your Honor, it's laughable to let a cleaning staff member defend the accused in such a serious case." "She doesn't need a janitor to defend her," Vivien Storm snapped, her voice cold with indignation. "You're embarrassing me, Mr. Lane." Jacob remained unshaken. He gently set aside the mop, reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick binder bristling with colorful sticky notes. "Your Honor, it's true, I'm not a licensed lawyer. I studied law at NYU but had to drop out in my second year due to family hardship. However, I've meticulously researched this case. I know every detail, every piece of evidence. I believe in the truth, and I believe Vivien Storm is innocent." An involuntary hush fell over the courtroom at the custodian's confident declaration. Judge Harris paused, then addressed Vivien Storm. "Ms. Storm, since you have no counsel present, the law permits me to allow another person to temporarily represent you in this hearing. Do you object to Mr. Lane speaking on your behalf?" Vivien stared at the empty chair beside her, then back at Jacob. In her sharp gaze, a flicker of curiosity appeared. "Let him speak," she said tersely. "Just this once," Judge Harris agreed with a nod. "Mr. Lane, you may proceed." Jacob approached the defense table, placed the binder before him, and removed his rubber gloves. With hundreds of eyes upon him, his heart pounded, not with fear, but with resolve. He had spent countless sleepless nights preparing for this moment. On March 7th, Stormtech was accused of forging digital signatures in the contract with Ravenmark Capital, but I have evidence showing those signatures did not originate from Ms. Storm's office. His clear, confident voice echoed through the courtroom. Silence reigned as every listener leaned in. no one dared sneer. They all realized, in that instant, that they had underestimated the man they thought was merely a janitor. Jacob Lane was not just a custodian, he was a defender of justice. And this was only the beginning of the gripping, high-tension battle to come. The courtroom fell into a hush so deep you could hear every anxious breath as Jacob's powerful words faded away. Judge Harris lifted his glasses, his sharp gaze flicking over the file Jacob had placed on the desk before settling on Jacob's resolute face. He drew in a quiet breath and nodded, inviting Jacob to carry on. But the moment Jacob opened the binder, Marshal Kent's mocking cough shattered the brief silence. The high-profile prosecutor, with his slicked, back-blonde hair and impeccably tailored gray suit, rose and strode into the center aisle, a cold, contemptuous smile playing on his lips. "Excuse me," Marshal called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Are we actually being serious here?" A janitor with no legal credentials standing up to defend the accused in a federal trial. Murmurs rippled through the gallery, and skeptical looks turned back to Jacob. Sensing the psychological edge, Marshal pressed on with casual derision. "Mr. Lane, perhaps you should return to your cleaning duties. This isn't a Broadway comedy." A few more snickers echoed around the room, but Jacob remained calm, unflinching. He'd grown accustomed to contempt and prejudice over the years, but today he had one clear mission: to uphold justice and expose the truth. Slowly, Jacob lifted his head and met Marshall's taunting stare, head on. "With all due respect, counselor," he said firmly, "if you believe a person's worth is defined by their job title or appearance, then I'm afraid you misunderstand the very spirit of American law." Marshall's smile curled into a sneer as his sharp eyes drilled into Jacob, dissecting his every move. "Oh, how quaint that you invoke the spirit of the law. Tell me, Mr. Lane, did you ever graduate from law school, or did you simply skim a few books and fancy yourself a lawyer?" Jacob's composure never wavered. He knew Marshal Kent well, the young, razor-sharp prosecutor who relished undermining anyone who dared oppose him. "As I mentioned," Jacob replied, clearly and confidently, "I left NYU Law School in my second year due to family hardship. Since then, I've studied the law relentlessly, every single day. True, I don't hold a formal law degree, but I assure you, the information I present here is accurate, comprehensive, and more than sufficient to prove Ms. Storm's innocence." The courtroom fell silent once again. Even Marshall's smirk faltered. Judge Harris leaned forward, clearly intrigued by Jacob's revelation. Regaining his composure, Marshall stepped closer to Jacob, eyes calculating. "Then, Mr. Lane, since you're so confident, can you succinctly explain the legal principle you believe will exonerate Ms. Storm?" Jacob nodded and pulled a carefully marked sheet from the binder. "I will, Your Honor. The crux of the matter is the digital signature on the amendment between Stormtech and Ravenmark Capital. The prosecution alleges that signature originated from a server in Ms. Storm's New York office on March 7th. However, after a thorough analysis of the document's metadata, I discovered the IP address actually traces back to a server in Zurich, Switzerland, not New York." Marshall paused, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his eyes before his usual confidence snapped back. "And what makes you think the findings of a non-technical janitor are enough to persuade a jury?" Jacob answered calmly, "I have all the technical evidence, including an expert report from an independent cybersecurity specialist. Every piece has been verified and authenticated." For the first time in the trial, Marshal Kent looked rattled. He attempted one last sneer. "Mr. Lane, do you really believe a few self-gathered documents can stand against our seasoned legal team?" Jacob met his gaze steadily. I'm not here to fight your team, Mr. Kent. I'm here to fight for the truth. And if you're certain you possess it, then you have nothing to fear from an ordinary janitor like me." Marshall's jaw tightened in visible frustration as he retreated. The courtroom again fell into tense silence, this time not out of doubt, but in astonishment at Jacob's poise and sharp reasoning. The initial prejudices against Jacob Lane began to crumble, and the battle for truth was only just beginning. The oppressive tension in the courtroom hadn't lifted. Jacob could feel Marshall Kent's cold stare dissecting his every move. The renowned prosecutor had never let anyone gain the upper hand so easily in his trials. But Jacob refused to waver. His previous words had already sent a ripple through the prosecution's once unshakable confidence. Calmly, Jacob picked up another document from his binder, hands steady though his heart still pounded from the exchange. He stepped forward toward Judge Harris, his voice measured but firm. "Your Honor, may I please detail the technical evidence regarding the origin of the digital signature?" Judge Harris gave a slight nod. He was clearly taking the arguments of this unassuming custodian very seriously now. Jacob opened his binder and removed a crisp, fully analyzed printout. "On the amendment between Stormtech and Ravenmark Capital, there are clear signs of a forged digital signature. At first glance, it closely mimics Ms. Storm's usual signature. But a deeper examination of the PDF's metadata reveals that it originated from a specific IP address located in Zurich, Switzerland, not from Stormtech's New York headquarters, as the prosecution claims." Marshall Kent's brow immediately furrowed with irritation. He cut in, his tone icy but betraying a flicker of uncertainty. "Simply pointing to a foreign IP address doesn't prove Ms. Storm wasn't involved. She could have used a VPN or other tools to mask her true location." Jacob was ready for this rebuttal. He answered calmly, "Mr. Kent, you're correct in part. However, this is a static IP address assigned to a Zurich office, an exact location that can be independently verified. My investigation shows it belongs to a small financial consultancy closely linked to Alter Holdings, Stormtech's direct competitor." A murmur of realization went through the courtroom as the gravity of his disclosure sunk in. Jacob pressed on before the prosecutor could interject. "Furthermore, the legal language of this amendment is incompatible with any contract template used by Stormtech's legal team. The sentence structure and formatting bear the hallmark style of European firms, completely unlike Ms. Storm's documented legal drafts." For the first time, Marshall Kent looked genuinely thrown off. He shot a quick glance at his assistants, searching for a retort, but Jacob had seized complete control of the narrative. Turning to Vivien Storm, Jacob saw her gaze upon him had changed. Surprise laced with admiration and discreet gratitude. She had never noticed Jacob Lane, the janitor she passed in the hallway every morning, but now he alone stood between her and ruin. Refusing to yield, Marshall tried one last jibe. "So, Mr. Lane, are you suggesting that a major corporation like Alter Holdings would orchestrate such a risky, clumsy plot just to frame Ms. Storm? Sounds like something out of a Hollywood thriller." Jacob remained unfazed, answering plainly, "Mr. Kent, I'm merely presenting the facts. The evidence I hold can be objectively verified. I'm not spinning a conspiracy theory. I'm clarifying the true origin of this signature. If you truly seek the truth, you'll want to investigate the IP address I provided." Judge Harris intervened immediately, bringing the debate to a halt. "I'm ordering the court's technical team to verify Mr. Lane's evidence right away. We'll recess for 1 hour to conduct this check. Everyone remain orderly and await the results." Marshall Kent stood frozen, knuckles white with suppressed anger. He had never imagined that the man he once regarded as a joke could so swiftly turn the tide. Jacob Lane had transformed from an overlooked custodian into the unexpected hero shaking the foundations of this critical trial. Vivien Storm's eyes remained fixed on Jacob. In that rare moment, the powerful CEO saw his true worth. For beyond his courage and keen intellect, it was his calm humility and unwavering commitment to justice that truly moved her. As the courtroom doors closed, Jacob took a deep breath to calm his racing heart. He knew this was only the first step. Marshal Kent would never concede easily. The fight for justice was long and fraught with challenges ahead. But now everyone could see. An ordinary man, armed with courage and faith in the truth, could change everything, even the deepest-rooted prejudices. When the courtroom door clicked shut, Jacob Lane let out a quiet sigh, as if a massive weight had lifted from his chest. He silently gathered his documents, neatly stacking them back on the defense table. A figure approached him slowly. It was Vivien Storm. Vivien stepped forward, her stride still confident even as she wrestled with a storm of emotions. Her eyes drifted over the face of the stranger who had just rescued her from collapse. Now, standing close to Jacob, she recognized those calm, deep-set eyes. They felt oddly familiar. A fleeting memory flickered through her mind, like a brief scene from a movie. You're the one who cleans my office, aren't you? Vivien asked, her voice a mixture of surprise and confusion. Jacob looked up and nodded gently, his tone steady as always. Yes, I've been cleaning your office for the last 3 years, Miss Storm. Vivien took a small step back, doubt and a hint of embarrassment flickering across her eyes. In all that time, she'd never truly noticed Jacob. He'd been like a silent shadow, gliding through the halls each evening while she tackled big projects and late meetings. He diligently tended to every corner of her office, yet she'd never really seen him, until today. "Why did you decide to help me?" Vivien asked, gratitude warring with suspicion in her gaze. "You could have ignored this and gone on living your peaceful life. Why jump into this mess?" Jacob met her eyes, sincerity shining through. "Ms. Storm, I do more than clean your office. I've watched Stormtech every day for 3 years. I've seen you pour yourself into this company, for your employees, for everyone here. A dedicated, honest person like you doesn't deserve these false accusations." Vivien fell silent, her lips pressing together. Jacob's words touched something deep inside her, a place she'd long hidden behind her perfect public facade. She was a powerful CEO, resolute before the world, but underneath she was still a woman facing isolation and pressure at the very top. "I don't know who to trust right now," Vivien sighed, her eyes revealing vulnerability for the first time. "The person I trusted most, my own lawyer, vanished without a word before the trial. Everything's in chaos." Jacob held her gaze, his voice firm yet gentle. "I understand, but if you'll work with me, I believe we can find the evidence to clear your name. Because this plot isn't just aimed at you, it's aimed at Stormtech itself." Vivien hesitated, skepticism in her eyes. "How can you be so sure?" Jacob reached into his jacket and pulled out a small stack of worn papers, handing them to her. They were meticulously kept notes in neat handwriting. Vivien opened them and was startled to see detailed records of irregular activity in the office over recent months, things she'd never noticed. "These are my observations from cleaning," Jacob explained softly. "Important documents strangely discarded, Paul Temple's suspicious comings and goings, and others. I grew concerned months ago, but it wasn't until this lawsuit that I realized how serious it was." Vivien scanned the pages, her eyes widening in disbelief. She saw how she'd been so focused on major deals that she'd missed these crucial clues. Paul Temple, Vivien whispered, betrayal and hurt cutting through her. He's been with me so long. I trusted him completely. Jacob shook his head sympathetically. Maybe that complete trust made it easier for him to carry out this scheme. But I believe that if we work together, we can uncover the whole truth. Vivien looked at Jacob again, her earlier doubts softening. She realized that despite his humble position, Jacob Lane was the only person who could help her piece this together. His honesty, composure, and keen insight gave her a sense of reassurance she hadn't felt before. "All right, Mr. Lane," Vivien said at last, her voice stronger and steely. "I'll work with you on this. But we have to be careful. Those behind this won't give up easily." Jacob offered a determined smile. "You can count on it, Miss Storm. I don't give up easily. We'll get to the bottom of this, no matter how tough it gets." As they stood facing each other in the quiet corridor outside the courtroom, an unexpected bond formed. Not of status or wealth, but of honesty, trust, and courage. They both knew the road ahead would be long and challenging, but in that moment, they'd found their most reliable ally. As Vivien Storm's footsteps faded down the corridor, Jacob Lane stood for a moment, thoughtfully watching her retreating figure. In his mind's eye, he saw a strong woman rendered vulnerable. She had, for the first time, allowed herself to trust a stranger. Jacob understood the great responsibility he had just taken on, and he felt no regret. He knew that to bring the truth to light, he had to start at the root of his earliest suspicions, those secrets he had stumbled upon in the trash. Silently, Jacob stepped out of the courtroom area, found a quiet corner, and sat down on a bench. He closed his eyes and recalled that chilly March night nearly 3 months ago, when his life had still passed in peaceful anonymity, amid his routine cleaning duties at the Stormtech office. It had been a cold, late March evening. Jacob remembered every detail: the harsh white fluorescent lights illuminating an empty hallway, the steady hum of the floor machine echoing like his own heartbeat in the dead of night. He had just finished tidying the main office and was about to move on next door when his gaze accidentally fell on a garbage bin just outside Vivien Storm's private office. Normally, he paid no mind to discarded paper, but that night something felt off. He noticed sheets scattered beside the bin, some not even shredded, a rare lapse in a tightly secured office. Suspicion nagged at him. He stepped closer, gloved hands gently lifting the topmost page. His eyes widened at the bright red, top-secret stamp and the clear heading, Ravenmark, Stormtech Contract Amendment. His heart pounded. Curiosity and a sense of alarm surged. He glanced around to ensure no one watched, then carefully stacked the documents and slipped them into his coat pocket. Later that night at home, Jacob couldn't sleep. He spread the binder on the small table in his modest Queen's apartment, switched on his battered desk lamp, and examined every line. Each provision chilled him further. Terms that would completely transfer joint project control from Stormtech to Ravenmark Capital, signed electronically with Vivien Storm's signature, and uniquely logged from a foreign IP address. Though no technical expert, Jacob understood enough to know this was not how Vivien or her legal team worked. In the days that followed, Jacob began to watch his surroundings more keenly. He was no longer just the cleaner. He became a silent observer, jotting down every oddity in meticulous notes. The person who caught his attention most was Paul Temple, Vivien's personal assistant. Paul's polite demeanor and seemingly airtight schedule masked an unnerving inconsistency. He often left the office at odd hours, made furtive calls in empty hallways, and appeared tense whenever he faced Vivien. Determined to dig deeper, Jacob discreetly tracked Paul's comings and goings. Step by step, he realized Paul was the critical link in the conspiracy. Paul had access to Vivien's digital signature credentials, explaining why the amendment's IP traced to Zurich, the site of Alter Holdings' European subsidiary, Stormtech's chief rival. Before Jacob could investigate further, the lawsuit erupted, plunging Vivien into a whirlwind of perilous fraud charges. Time was running out, and he knew he had to act fast. In that moment, he resolved he could no longer remain silent. Jacob's eyes opened from the memory, and he realized he was still sitting on the cold bench outside the courtroom. Around him, people buzzed about the trial. He rose, pulled out his phone, and dialed an old friend, Reggie Holmes, an investigative reporter. "Reggie, I need your help," Jacob whispered into the phone, his gaze fixed on the empty corridor. "Jacob, it's been a while. What's going on?" Reggie's familiar rasp answered from the other end. "I have evidence of a major plot to destroy CEO Vivien Storm and take over Stormtech, but I need deeper verification before bringing it to court. Can you help me look into Alter Holdings and Paul Temple?" Jacob cut to the chase. Silence fell before Reggie's voice turned grave. "Jacob, you know this isn't a joke. Alter Holdings is powerful, and you could be in real danger getting mixed up in this." Jacob smiled faintly, determination in his tone. "I know, Reggie, but I can't ignore this. It's not just about a company, it's about justice and truth. I'm willing to face danger if that's what it takes." After a moment, Reggie replied decisively, "All right, I'll help, but be careful, Jacob. These aren't people you want to mess with." Jacob nodded, even though Reggie couldn't see him. He hung up, his eyes resolute as he looked down the hallway. He knew this battle had truly begun, but fear no longer gripped him, for he was fighting for what was right, and above all, he was not alone. The call with Reggie Holmes just ended, and Jacob slowly tucked his phone into his jacket pocket, Reggie's warning echoing in his mind. "Alter Holdings isn't some small outfit, Jacob. You're stepping into a battle that could cost you dearly." Jacob took a deep breath to steady himself. He knew he had no other choice. Having come this far, he must press on. That evening, as the streetlights flickered on and the city slipped into darkness, Jacob decided to return to the Stormtech offices. In the familiar hush, he made his way to Paul Temple's former workspace, now sealed off ever since Paul abruptly resigned weeks before Vivien's trial. Using his insider knowledge to avoid the security cameras he cleaned daily, Jacob slipped into the room. The door creaked open, revealing a space strangely untouched, as though its occupant had just stepped out for a moment. He began searching, carefully rifling through documents, notebooks, and stray memos. His gaze halted at a locked drawer in the desk. From his pocket, he produced a set of spare keys reserved for senior cleaning staff. The lock popped open with a soft click, like a whispered warning. Inside, Jacob found a second phone, Paul's hidden burner. His heart raced. He powered it on, the screen lit up without a passcode prompt, an oversight born of Paul's overconfidence. Jacob opened the messaging app and email client. Immediately, exchanges between Paul Temple and an anonymous contact filled the screen. Jacob scanned them swiftly, chills creeping down his spine. These messages proved that Paul had betrayed Vivien in exchange for a hefty payoff and a key role at Alter Holdings once Stormtech fell. Storm will never see it coming. All docs are set. Once we have her digital signature, we'll trigger everything. Ravenmark takes control. Stormtech collapses, Jacob murmured, reading a text Paul sent weeks ago. His chest tightened at the depth of this betrayal. He dove into Paul's stored emails next. A long string between Paul and someone labeled M. Lyles leapt out at him. Undeniably, Martin Lyles, the ruthless CEO of Alter Holdings, infamous for his cutthroat tactics. In the most recent email, Lyles wrote with terse authority, "Temple, ensure everything goes according to plan. We need Stormtech to fall quickly so we can acquire it at rock bottom prices. I will not tolerate mistakes." Jacob gripped the phone, anger surging. Here lay the meticulously plotted scheme to destroy Vivien Storm's career and reputation, engineered by the very assistant she once trusted most. He knew this evidence could turn the case on its head, but he also knew he needed to verify and handle it with utmost care before presenting it in court. He copied the messages and emails onto his USB drive, returned the phone to its drawer, and relocked it as if untouched. Silently, he exited Paul's office and left the building, his mind heavy yet resolute. Back in his modest Queens apartment, Jacob immediately dialed Reggie Holmes, his voice more urgent than ever. "Reggie, I've uncovered proof that Paul Temple and Martin Lyles of Alter Holdings conspired to destroy Stormtech." There was a tense pause before Reggie's voice came, taut with concern. "Jacob, are you absolutely sure about this?" "I have the full evidence, texts and emails, everything clearly documented. I need you to independently verify the sender identities and IP addresses. We need rock, solid proof for court." Jacob replied without hesitation. "I'll do it tonight," Reggie said determinedly. "But Jacob, you must be more careful than ever. If Lyles catches wind of this, he'll do whatever it takes to stop you, and stay vigilant." "I understand, Reggie," Jacob answered firmly, "but I have no choice now. Justice must prevail, and I will do whatever it takes to make that happen." After sending the evidence to Reggie, Jacob sat quietly at his desk, gazing out the window. The city at night was a sea of twinkling lights, but he knew how much darkness and deceit lurked beneath their glow. Yet within him burned an unwavering belief in goodness, justice, and truth. Jacob had chosen to enter this fight, and no matter how dangerous it became, he would not back down until the truth was fully revealed. His eyes shone with unprecedented resolve. The real battle had only just begun. The call with Reggie Holmes just ended, and Jacob slipped his phone back into his jacket pocket, Reggie's warning still echoing in his mind. Alter Holdings isn't a small operation, Jacob. You're stepping into a fight that could cost you dearly. Jacob drew in a deep breath, steadying himself. He knew there was no turning back now. Having come this far, he had to keep going. That evening, as streetlights flickered on and the city sank into darkness, Jacob made his way back to the Stormtech offices. In the familiar hush, he headed straight for Paul Temple's former workspace, the room that had been sealed off ever since Paul abruptly resigned weeks before Vivien's trial. Using the very security cameras he cleaned daily to avoid detection, Jacob slipped inside. The door eased open, revealing an unnervingly untouched office, as if its occupant had stepped away only moments ago. He began systematically searching, carefully rifling through files, notebooks, and stray memos. His gaze landed on the desk's locked drawer. From his pocket, he retrieved the set of master keys issued only to senior custodians. The lock clicked open softly, like a whispered warning. Inside, Jacob found a second cell phone, Paul's hidden burner. His heart pounded. He powered it on, the screen lit up with no passcode prompt. Either Paul had been careless or overconfident that no one would ever find it. Jacob opened the messaging app and email client. Immediately, exchanges between Paul Temple and an anonymous contact appeared. His eyes raced over every line, and a chill ran down his spine. These messages proved that Paul had betrayed Vivien Storm in exchange for a hefty payout and a coveted position at Alter Holdings once Stormtech collapsed. Storm will never see it coming. All the documents are ready. Once we have her digital signature, everything activates. Ravenmark takes control. Stormtech falls. Jacob read aloud a text Paul had sent weeks earlier. His chest tightened at the depth of this betrayal. He scrolled through Paul's archived emails next. A long thread between Paul and someone labeled M. Lyles jumped out. Undeniably, Martin Lyles, the ruthless CEO of Alter Holdings, known for his cutthroat tactics. In the most recent message, Lyles wrote with terse authority, "Temple, ensure everything goes according to plan. We need Stormtech to fall quickly so we can acquire it at rock bottom prices. I will not tolerate mistakes." Jacob gripped the phone, anger surging. Here was the meticulously plotted scheme to destroy Vivien's career and reputation, engineered by the very assistant she had trusted most. He knew this evidence could turn the case upside down, but he also knew it must be handled with extreme care before being presented in court. Any mistake now could undo everything. Quickly, he copied the messages and emails to his own USB drive, returned the phone to its drawer, and relocked it as if untouched. Silently, he left Paul's office and exited the building, his mind heavy but determined. Back in his modest Queens apartment, Jacob immediately called Reggie Holmes, his voice more urgent than ever. "Reggie, I've found irrefutable proof that Paul Temple and Martin Lyles of Alter Holdings conspired to destroy Stormtech." After a tense pause, Reggie's voice came, strained with concern. "Jacob, are you absolutely sure about this? I have everything. Texts, emails, clear documentation. I need you to independently verify the senders' identities and the IP addresses. We need bullet, proof for the court." Jacob replied without hesitation. "I'll get on it tonight," Reggie said resolutely. "But Jacob, you must be more careful than ever. If Lyles gets wind of this, he'll do anything to stop you. Stay on guard." "I understand, Reggie," Jacob answered firmly. "But there's no turning back. Justice must prevail, and I'll do whatever it takes to make that happen." After sending the evidence to Reggie, Jacob sat quietly at his desk, staring out the window. Below, the city lights shimmered like stars, but he knew how much darkness and deceit lay hidden beneath their glow. Yet a fierce belief in goodness, justice, and truth swelled within him. Jacob had chosen this fight, and no matter how dangerous it grew, he would not back down until the truth was fully revealed. His eyes burned with resolve. The real battle was only just beginning. In the days after the threatening phone call, Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He knew he'd become the target of a dangerous power, and now the decisive trial loomed ever closer. The morning sunlight on the day of the hearing seemed bent on chasing away the shadows that had dogged him. Yet Jacob still felt tense as he entered the courtroom. The chamber was more crowded than usual. The murmur of the crowd blended into a chaotic din, heightening the pressure. Jacob took his seat in the witness section, and every pair of eyes turned toward him. Vivien Storm, dressed in a dark navy suit, sat quietly at the defense table. She looked up at Jacob, and for the first time her eyes shone with hope and genuine gratitude. Marshal Kent was already at his table, radiating his usual confidence but with a colder, more challenging glare than ever. The moment Jacob sat down, Marshal rose and, his voice dripping with derision, addressed the judge. "Your Honor, it is absurd that a serious trial like this should rely on the testimony of a janitor like Jacob Lane. We are letting emotions run wild instead of focusing on real legal proof." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gallery, echoing Marshal's skepticism. But Jacob remained unshaken. He stood calmly, turned toward the judge, and spoke with unprecedented clarity and strength. "Your Honor, I am not here to argue about my background or my current job. I am here to present the truth, backed by concrete evidence that I have gathered." Judge Harris looked at Jacob, then nodded gently. "Mr. Lane, you may proceed." Jacob opened his binder and began, his voice steady and resolute. "As I have stated before, the digital signature on the amendment between Stormtech and Ravenmark did not originate from Ms. Storm's New York office, but from an Alter Holdings facility in Zurich. This was not a random act. It was a meticulously planned move to destroy Ms. Storm and her company." Marshal Kent immediately interjected, his tone sharp. "That is pure speculation, Your Honor. There is no convincing proof Ms. Storm didn't sign this herself from a remote location." Jacob held up his binder toward the judge and jury. "Your Honor, I have authenticated emails and messages exchanged between Paul Temple, Ms. Storm's former assistant, and Martin Lyles, the CEO of Alter Holdings. These communications explicitly outline their plot to forge the digital signature, with the clear intent of forcing Stormtech into a fire sale." Marshall frowned, anger flaring in his voice. "Where did this evidence come from? How do we know it isn't fabricated?" Jacob met Marshall's gaze, his tone calm but persuasive. "All of this evidence has been independently verified by veteran investigative reporter Reggie Holmes. We have traced the specific IP address in question directly to Alter Holdings' Zurich office. This is incontrovertible proof." The courtroom fell into absolute silence. Even Marshal Kent was momentarily speechless, unable to refute Jacob's sharp reasoning and the solid evidence he presented. Jacob pressed on, his eyes brimming with determination. "That's not all. I also recovered Paul Temple's secondary phone from his old office at Stormtech. That device contains detailed messages outlining the plan to sabotage Stormtech and crush Ms. Storm's career. I have submitted all of this to both the court and independent investigators." Marshal Kent stood in stunned silence for a moment before erupting, "Your Honor, Mr. Lane clearly trespassed and seized personal property. This flagrantly violates legal procedure and cannot be admitted as evidence." Jacob replied coolly, unfazed by the accusation. "I am Stormtech's custodian. I am authorized to enter every office as part of my duties. I did not pick locks or steal anything. The documents were either discarded in the trash or left in a drawer I routinely serviced. They were negligently exposed, and I only realized their significance by chance." The courtroom held its breath in tense silence. Marshal Kent had no further rebuttal. His face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. For the first time, this once arrogant prosecutor was thoroughly undone by irrefutable evidence. In that hush, Vivien Storm looked at Jacob. Her eyes, free now of doubt or reservation, shone with deep gratitude and sincere admiration. For the first time, she truly understood that the man she'd always overlooked had been quietly fighting for her and Stormtech, with intelligence, courage, and rare bravery. Jacob felt the warmth of her gaze. He offered a small, grateful smile, a surprising sense of comfort welling up inside him. Though the trial was far from over and challenges lay ahead, in that moment, Jacob Lane knew he had done the right thing, protecting the truth at all costs. The battle would continue, but for the first time in a long while, Jacob saw a clear light of hope on the horizon. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence after Jacob's compelling arguments and evidence. Marshal Kent stood motionless for a long moment, his expression shifting from anger to cold resolve. Jacob saw that familiar look in Marshall's eyes, the look of someone about to unleash one final vicious strike. Marshall regained his trademark confidence, straightened up, and slowly approached Jacob. His voice rang out, dripping with provocation. "Mr. Lane, what you've said is certainly persuasive, but I wonder, can anyone here truly trust someone with your past?" Jacob furrowed his brow but remained calm, waiting for Marshall's next move. He knew Marshall was deliberately trying to unnerve him by digging into old wounds. Marshall continued, each word cold and calculated. "Mr. Lane, you once attended New York University Law School, yet you never graduated. Was that because you were involved in a serious disciplinary incident?" A ripple of whispered gossip swept through the courtroom as curious eyes turned toward Jacob. Even Vivien Storm at the defense table looked unsettled, her face showing worry and doubt for the first time. Jacob took a deep breath. He'd seen this coming. The past can't be erased, but today he was ready to face it head on, in full view of everyone in this court. He stood tall, meeting Marshall's gaze and every onlooker's stare. His voice, though touched with emotion, rang out with firm conviction. "Yes, I did attend New York University Law School, and yes, I did not graduate. But it wasn't for disciplinary reasons. It was because I had to give up my dream to care for my seriously ill wife." The courtroom froze in stunned silence. The murmurs instantly died away, replaced by a hush charged with empathy. Jacob pressed on, his tone shaking but resolute, each word drawn from the depths of his heart. "When my wife was diagnosed with cancer, we had only just married. I had to choose between my future career and standing by the woman I loved. I chose to stay with her, caring for her day after day until she passed. After losing my soulmate, the only family I had left was my young daughter Emma, her laughter the last bright spark in my life of loss." He paused, gathering himself while Marshall Kent involuntarily took a step back, a rare flicker of discomfort crossing his face. The courtroom felt as if it were breathing together, moved by Jacob's confession. Jacob drew in a steadying breath and continued, his voice now calm and proud. "I'm not ashamed of my past, Mr. Kent. Yes, I couldn't finish school, but I never gave up my faith in justice and what is right. I have sacrificed dreams and opportunities, but I have no regrets. Those sacrifices taught me that the most important thing in life is to stand up for the truth and defend the values we believe in." He turned to face the jury, his gaze unwavering. "Alter Holdings and Paul Temple conspired to destroy Mrs. Storm's life and career out of greed. I stand here not for your pity, but so you can see the truth with your own eyes. The evidence I've provided is objective, authentic, and entirely reliable. I ask you not to let prejudice or cruel words cloud your judgment." Marshall Kent remained silent, unable to muster another objection. He looked down at the floor, his usual swagger gone. The courtroom held an absolute stillness. Vivien Storm looked at Jacob with unreserved admiration, her eyes filled with heartfelt gratitude. In that moment, she understood that the man she'd once overlooked was the one who had quietly protected her and Stormtech, with intelligence, courage, and extraordinary bravery. Jacob felt the warmth of her gaze and offered a gentle smile. Though the trial was far from over and danger still lay ahead, he knew he had done the right thing, defending the truth at all costs. The struggle would continue, but for the first time in a long while, Jacob Lane saw a clear glimmer of hope on the horizon. The courtroom doors closed behind Vivien and Jacob, leaving an intense, thoughtful silence in their wake. Jacob sat quietly on the familiar wooden bench, his gaze fixed on nothing in particular. He still could hardly believe he had just confronted his deepest personal pain in front of so many strangers. Yet, deep inside, he felt an immense lightness, as if a great burden had finally been lifted. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the large courtroom windows, as though chasing away the shadows and pressure of the previous day's proceedings. The courtroom was packed again. Every eye focused on the jury as they filed out, faces solemn and determined. Jacob could feel his heart pounding. He was tense, yet outwardly calm. Marshal Kent sat across the room, his sharp gaze masking his own nerves. Martin Lyles, the powerful CEO of Alter Holdings, was also present. He sat silently, his usual confidence shaken by the weight of the overwhelming evidence against him. Judge Harris spoke in a measured tone, breaking the stillness. "Jury, have you reached your verdict in this case?" The jury foreperson, a middle-aged woman with a kindly yet serious countenance, stood and addressed the court with clear resolve. "Your Honor, we have reached our final decision." A collective breath held the courtroom in silence, broken only by Jacob's and Vivien's racing hearts. "We, the jury, after careful consideration of all evidence and arguments presented, find the defendant, Vivien Storm, not guilty on all counts." An eruption of applause and cheers filled the room. Vivien could hardly believe what she heard. She covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. She turned to Jacob, her gaze brimming with heartfelt gratitude and uncontainable joy. Jacob felt as though a massive weight had been lifted from his chest. He stood, offering a quiet but genuine smile, the first one he'd felt in a long time. Marshal Kent remained frozen in his seat, disappointment and bitterness etched across his features. He had thrown everything he had at this case, yet truth and justice had prevailed over every tactic he had employed. Martin Lyles rose and slipped out of the courtroom without a word, his expression dark and rigid. This defeat marked the greatest setback in his powerful, scheming career, and Alter Holdings would pay dearly for its unethical actions. As the applause subsided, Judge Harris turned to Jacob, his voice warm and sincere. "I would like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Jacob Lane. Your courage, intellect, and unwavering belief in justice have ensured this case was decided rightly. Mr. Lane, you have taught us all a valuable lesson. Never judge a person by their job title, background, or appearance. Today's restoration of justice is not only for Ms. Vivien Storm, but for you, and for everyone who believes in the truth." The courtroom broke into applause again, directed squarely at Jacob. For the first time, he felt the genuine recognition and respect of those around him. He bowed his head, deeply moved, knowing that from this moment on his life would turn a new page, one free from the shadows of prejudice and doubt. Vivien approached Jacob, her voice trembling with emotion. "Jacob, I cannot begin to thank you enough. You have sacrificed more than I ever could have asked. You didn't just save me. You upheld truth, justice, and our faith in what's right." Jacob smiled softly, his voice warm and earnest. "Vivien, what matters most to me is that justice has been served. And you know, perhaps this is how I find peace for myself, after all the loss and pain I've endured." Vivien looked deeply into his eyes, her words filled with admiration. "Jacob, Stormtech needs someone like you. I don't want you to remain in the custodial role. You must become our legal advisor. We need your intelligence, your bravery, and your sense of fairness." Surprised, Jacob's face brightened with a trusting smile. "I'm honored by your offer. I believe together we can rebuild Stormtech, not only stronger, but as a symbol of fairness and transparency." Vivien and Jacob walked out of the courtroom side by side, sunlight blazing ahead of them. This was not just a personal victory. It was a triumph for all those who had ever been overlooked or underestimated because of their role or background. Justice had been fully restored, and faith in what is good had been rekindled in everyone's hearts. and Jacob knew that from this day forward he would hold that belief strong, no matter what lay ahead. The late afternoon sun draped the city in a warm golden glow, as if soothing away all the tension and loss of the days gone by. The trial had ended with the best possible outcome, but both Jacob and Vivien knew that the healing of their emotional wounds was only just beginning. Once justice was restored, Jacob had accepted Vivien's heartfelt invitation to become Stormtech's legal advisor. Though he'd hesitated at first, the sincerity in Vivien's eyes and the shared mission they now carried made it impossible to refuse. His new role not only brought him the recognition he deserved, but also afforded him the chance to grow closer to Vivien and build a deeper bond. One late evening, the office was quiet except for a soft desk lamp. Jacob was poring over important documents at his desk when a gentle knock sounded at the door. He looked up to find Vivien standing there, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. "I thought you might still be here," she said softly, smiling as she stepped in and set a cup in front of him. Jacob returned her smile, feeling an unexpected warmth at her kindness. He lifted the cup, cradling it in his hands as the heat seeped through. "Thank you, Vivien. It's been hard to tear myself away from work lately." Vivien slid into the chair opposite him and gazed out the window at the deepening twilight. A comfortable silence settled over the room before she turned back to him and spoke gently. "Jacob, I still can't believe what you did for me and for Stormtech. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been there." Jacob sighed, taking a thoughtful sip of his coffee before answering in a warm, earnest tone. "Vivien, I only did what was right, but I owe you my thanks as well. Your trust and the opportunity you gave me restored my faith in myself. After losing my wife, I thought I'd never find meaning in life again." Vivien watched him quietly, her eyes soft with understanding. "You know, Jacob, I've experienced deep loss and loneliness myself. As CEO, people assume I'm strong, flawless, invincible. But inside, I carried invisible scars no one could see. I was lonely amid all my success, unsure of who I could really trust." Jacob met her gaze with tenderness and compassion. He recognized that she was beginning to open up, revealing her most private wounds. He responded with heartfelt empathy. "Vivien, I think it was our shared loneliness and pain that brought us together. I've always believed that everyone deserves a chance at happiness and peace, no matter how painful their past may be." Vivien's smile was gentle and genuine, a peace she hadn't felt in years shining on her face. "Jacob, it took me so long to realize that happiness isn't about dazzling accomplishments. It's about honest hearts and genuine connections. And now that you're here, I understand that more clearly than ever." Jacob felt his heart skip a beat as he looked into her eyes. He sensed that between them, something deeper than partnership, trust, or friendship was blossoming. Something profound and special. He spoke softly, his voice trembling with resolve. "Vivien, we've both endured so much hurt, but I believe everyone deserves a second chance at true happiness. And I'm grateful that life gave me the chance to meet you and share this journey." Vivien gently placed her hand over his, her expression tender and sincere. "Jacob, I truly want us to build a new future together, not just for Stormtech but for ourselves. You don't have to hide your heart anymore. I want to walk beside you so we can heal together." Jacob squeezed her hand, moved and filled with hope. "I want that too, Vivien. I never thought I could open up again, but meeting you showed me that happiness is worth risking the darkness to reach for it." They held each other's gaze, a deep understanding and genuine affection passing between two souls who had weathered life's storms. In that moment, they knew they would never be alone again. Outside, the city lights sparkled to life, but inside that warm, quiet office, their journey of healing and connection was only beginning. Together, they would overcome their past traumas and build a future bright with hope, love, and meaning. In the weeks that followed, both Jacob and Vivien felt change unfolding in their lives and in their hearts every single day. Their shared empathy, trust, and genuine affection not only healed old wounds, but also inspired a powerful renewal of Stormtech from the ashes. Once teetering on the brink of collapse due to betrayal and conspiracy, Stormtech began a spectacular revival. In the aftermath of the crisis, Vivien made restoring her employees' and clients' faith her top priority. She and Jacob spent countless hours meeting one-on-one with staff, listening to stories and concerns they'd never before had the chance to share. From that sincere engagement sprang a completely new corporate culture, one defined by equality, trust, and shared responsibility. Jacob officially took on the role of legal advisor and head of human resources. Drawing on his profound life experience and heartfelt understanding, he quickly became a key figure in rebuilding Stormtech's core values. Under his leadership, ongoing discussions about business ethics, social responsibility, and the power of human trust became commonplace. One by one, employees' confidence in the company was restored, not just by the promise of a brighter future, but by the palpable honesty and fairness they saw reflected in Jacob's eyes and actions. But Stormtech's transformation had another special catalyst: Emma, Jacob's young daughter. With her radiant smile, keen intellect, and pure heart, she rapidly became a living symbol of Stormtech's future. After school, Emma would often visit the office, bearing sketches brimming with creativity and ideas for children's technology. Her innocence and passion for discovery inspired everyone at the company, reminding them that their ultimate goal was to build a better tomorrow for the next generation. One Friday afternoon, as employees were preparing to leave, Vivien called a company-wide meeting in the grand conference room. Jacob stood by her side, his gaze soft and affectionate on Emma, who sat eagerly in the front row. Vivien spoke, her voice both heartfelt and strong. "Today, I want to extend a special thank you to each of you who never abandoned Stormtech during our darkest hours. We've weathered challenges that once seemed insurmountable, and it was in those very struggles that we rediscovered what we had almost forgotten: trust, accountability, and equality." The room broke into genuine, thunderous applause. Vivien turned to look at Jacob, her eyes full of gratitude and fondness. He nodded and picked up from her seamlessly, his voice imbued with emotion. "We've learned that Stormtech is more than a successful tech company. It's a place where each of us can live and work with dignity and faith in one another. That is the strongest foundation no one can ever destroy." Jacob paused, beaming proudly at Emma. "Stormtech's future doesn't rest on Vivien or me alone. It rests on the next generation, on people like Emma. It's their creativity, their love of life, and their boundless optimism that ensure we never lose hope in what's to come." Emma looked up at her father, pride shining in her eyes. She rose and spoke in a clear, confident voice. "I believe Stormtech will be the greatest place ever, because my dad and Miss Vivien always do what's right. I promise I'll study hard so that someday I can work here too and help everyone believe in the good like they do." Laughter and applause erupted throughout the room, faces lighting up with renewed faith and hope. Vivien stepped forward and gently embraced Emma, her voice warm and sincere. "Emma, you've taught me an important lesson. Success isn't measured by revenue or profit, but by the honesty, trust, and love we share every day." In the weeks that followed, Stormtech not only fully recovered, but soared to new heights. Jacob's integrity and dedication, paired with Vivien's compassionate leadership, attracted new customers and partners who truly believed in the company's renewed values. As for Alter Holdings, Martin Lyles faced serious fallout from the scandal. His company's reputation took a severe hit, major partners withdrew, and he was forced into a complete restructuring to avoid bankruptcy. Paul Temple confronted criminal charges and saw his career irrevocably ruined. In the end, truth and justice triumphed unmistakably. One late afternoon, Jacob and Vivien stood side by side at the large office window, gazing out at the city bathed in sunset light. Vivien placed a gentle hand on Jacob's shoulder and spoke softly. "Jacob, thank you for helping me see a new future. Not just for the company, but for my life as well." Jacob met her eyes and gave a warm, genuine smile. "Vivien, you helped me rediscover life's meaning, and the belief that it's always worth hoping. From this day forward, we will rebuild together, rising from these ashes to create the future we've always dreamed of." Vivien squeezed his hand, her eyes full of love and trust. They knew challenges still lay ahead, but with trust, responsibility, and sincere affection, they would face them together and build a bright, meaningful future filled with hope. The gentle sunset draped the city in soft orange and pink hues. From the top floor of the Stormtech building, Jacob and Vivien stood at the large window, quietly watching the bustling streets below. This peaceful moment marked a fresh beginning, a chapter brimming with hope, love, and the courage they'd built together. Since Stormtech's rebirth, Jacob and Vivien's relationship had deepened into something sincere and profound. There were no grand declarations or rushed gestures, but every look, every smile, every word they shared carried boundless care and affection. One evening, Vivien invited Jacob and Emma over for dinner. As the warm glow of the dining room lights filled the space, Emma sat beside Vivien, enthusiastically recounting her school-day adventures with the infectious energy of a lively child. Jacob watched them both with love and pride, feeling a peace he'd once thought he'd never know again. Suddenly, Emma paused, her eyes bright with curiosity as she looked between Jacob and Vivien, then asked with innocent candor, "Miss Vivien, Daddy and you're in love, right?" Vivien's cheeks flushed, but she quickly offered a gentle smile, glancing at Jacob for confirmation. Jacob placed his hand lightly over Vivien's and answered warmly, "Emma, sometimes love doesn't need to be said out loud. It shows itself in how we treat each other, caring for and protecting one another every day." Emma nodded eagerly, as if she fully understood her dad's words. Then, with pride in her voice, she added, "I know. Love is what Dad did to protect you in Stormtech, right? I'll always love and protect the people who matter to me, too." Vivien looked at Jacob with heartfelt gratitude, squeezing his hand as she spoke softly. "Jacob, it's your courage, honesty, and the love you've shown me in Stormtech that taught me real happiness lies in our daily actions. I never thought I could open my heart like this again, but you helped me overcome every prejudice and hurt." Jacob smiled gently, his eyes shining with conviction. "Vivien, you've shown me that true love never loses to hardship. Real love isn't in words, it's in the things we do for each other every day." In the weeks that followed, Jacob and Vivien continued side by side, quietly, without fanfare, but always present to support, encourage, and share life's ups and downs. Stormtech became a beacon of success and fairness, a place where people didn't just work. They lived with full hearts and unwavering faith. But their journey of healing didn't stop at Stormtech's doors. Together, they founded a charity called Heart and Courage, dedicated to supporting those who faced prejudice, injustice, or been forgotten by society. Stories of Jacob and Vivien's efforts spread throughout the community, powerfully reminding everyone that love, courage, and kindness can break down barriers and overcome any challenge. One day, Jacob and Vivien returned to the very courtroom where they'd faced their greatest trials. This time, they came as inspirational speakers, sharing their story with hundreds of people seeking hope and motivation. Jacob stood before the audience, his voice steady and heartfelt. "We want to share the most important lesson we've learned on this journey. Love isn't found in what you say, but in what you do. When you have the courage to act for truth, for justice, and for the people you care about, that's when love becomes an unstoppable force." Vivien followed, her eyes full of faith and hope. "And that's why we're here today. We want you to know that no matter who you are or what you've been through, if you have love and courage, you can overcome any limit or prejudice to find true happiness." The room erupted in applause, each person moved by Jacob and Vivien's powerful message. It was more than a lesson in love. It was living proof of kindness, bravery, and steadfast belief in goodness. That evening, as they walked out of the courthouse, Jacob gently took Vivien's hand. Under the soft glow of the street lights, they strolled together in serene contentment. Vivien looked up at Jacob and said softly, "Thank you, Jacob, for showing me what true love and courage really mean. I know that whatever comes our way, as long as we trust and act for one another, every challenge will only make our love stronger." Jacob smiled warmly, his eyes reflecting love and certainty. "Vivien, we've shown that true love isn't in grand gestures but in the smallest, most genuine actions. That's the message I want to share with Emma, with everyone, and especially with you." Vivien rested her head on Jacob's shoulder, her smile radiant. In that moment, amid the city's twinkling lights, they both understood that their shared journey had become the clearest testament to the extraordinary power of love, courage, and kindness. Values strong enough to transcend any barrier or prejudice and to shine forever. We've journeyed together through a story of how genuine love, bold courage, and simple kindness can overcome every obstacle and prejudice to triumph and shine eternally. Which moment in Jacob and Vivien's story moved you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss our next meaningful stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.